when you say that it revitalized what you were doing, at what point do you think that started to decrease?
There was it was the last two meets I've gotten to the point where I felt like I was burned out and I wasn't having fun with it, where I was like, God damn it, I have to squat heavy today. And then, some sessions would go south and then some sessions would go good. And then I'm like, I'm good. Like, let's go do it. But I really have felt the last three, maybe, I've had to rely pure on like execute as somebody that's done this for a while, not like, let's go have some fun and lift some weights. And then what was crazy about this one is I was in that same mode, and then everybody was so cool and just, you know how it is in multiply. Yeah. Everybody's cool as shit. Mm-hmm. So everybody was just fucking around having a good time in warm-ups, and I was like, dude, this is what I love about this.
Was it a full open meet to where you had all different types of lifters there, all different levels of lifters there?
There was all different levels of lifters. There was a lot of multiply people. I think it was almost primarily multiply, but I believe he was trying to market it as like an unlimited, like, let's get everybody here and just throw some big weights around.
Sometimes I think that's where lifters can begin to lose a little interest, is they're only looking at the big meets and they're only around lifters that are in the big meets.
Yeah.
And you get a little removed from that.
Yep.
And then when
that was exactly what happened.
Yeah. Then when you go to a meet that has multiple categories of lifters there, or even if you just go to a local meet, because at a certain point you don't want to go to meets at all because they're boring as hell. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Right. But sometimes you may have to go help somebody, and then you sit back and you just notice that people are breaking PRs with 315 deadlifts.
They had a kid there, and it was his first 600-pound squat, and he squatted this thing and just went fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is fucking badass, man. That pumped me up. And then he followed me online. I followed him. I congratulated him on his squat. It was cool. And now we're friends online because of that. That's one of the things I like about social media. But this was just, it was, I made a post about it after. I was going through this weird thing, competitive mindset wise, where I kind of started to feel like I was missing something, or I was acting like a pussy because I didn't have that like outright like Chuck V, like go right at the guy competitiveness. And I never believed in that for powerlifting for me personally. But I was like, all right, am I missing that? Am I shying away from that? What's going on? So I'm like, I'm going to go right at that. And I'm like, so this was a meet where this is going to sound dumb because state records and things like that, but like I have the biggest squat in Michigan history, and that had been unbroken for a long time. And we had a lot of badass dudes up in Michigan. So that was something that I wanted to get when I started. And I wanted to keep that for as long as I could and, not let anybody take it as long as I was competing or whatever. But at one point I was like, I don't care. I'll sacrifice the squat. I don't care about the numbers, the PRs, the totals. I'm going to win only against all these other guys, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, fuck this guy, fuck that guy, whatever. I'm going to go beat all their asses. It doesn't matter what I have to do, to the point where I had some bulge disc act up and everything. And I'm like, fuck it, cortisone shot, let's go. And I was just going to go there. And I went, and then I was in that mindset and I wasn't having fun. And then I hit the warm-up room, and then I started having that camaraderie that we had. Everybody's like, hey man, what's up? Meeting everybody, saying hi. A bunch of guys that I knew from online that we never met in person. The main guy I was competing against, Stephen Slater, ended up bringing me some of his gym shirts for free, gave it to me and my wife. And for free, and then he ended up being super cool. And then we started chatting training after the meet, and I was telling him about a bunch of shit that was going on with his grip because of his neck issues. He ended up signing up with me for training. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes you can lose sight of why you started.
Yeah, that was it. And it was, it didn't fulfill me in any sort of a way. And it also reiterated the fact that that's not how I competitively think about this sport. Mm-hmm. It's always been me versus me, like go to the next phase above where you're at. And that's gotten me, it's gotten me along just fine. I don't know why I changed it, but it was just, I don't know if I was reading stuff, but I kept seeing stuff online. I'm like, all right, like am I not outright competitive, like man-to-man competitive anymore? Because I used to love that. That was that was why I started fighting back in the day. I loved that. That was why I got out of football, because I had too many things that were not me directly competing against that guy and somebody not doing their job. So then I look like shit. I didn't like that. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go right back at that. It didn't do anything for me. And then after I made a post and I made a rant about that, and it was one of my most popular ones ever. Everybody started hitting me up like, dude, I did the same thing. This is exactly how I feel about it, which was good. It made me feel good because if I would have known that like that was a common theme, not that I care what other people do, but I wouldn't have probably questioned it like I did.
Well, it's kind of misdirected too, because you have no control, over what somebody else does.
That was exactly what I put in the rant. I'm like, if there's a guy if you're benching against Jimmy Kolb, I put this in my post, like, you're not going to put on Eye of the Tiger in a PR song and then stare at him and will your way to a bigger bench press than him or even anywhere close. And your meet's already decided by how prepared you were, probably about 3 weeks out. Mm-hmm. You're not getting any stronger. So that just is what it is. So what are we doing here? Why are we, you know what I mean? I don't, like, I get where there was a time and a place where that had to have happened. But I think this happens a lot with lifters, is like they see the old West Side shit and they try to recreate it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that was a special time and place and it's not going to be replicated again. That's authentic. You're going to end up being a fucking poser and you're going to look like a clown if you try to recreate this stuff.
Well, even with that though, if we're doing max effort work, there might be one or two guys I might be able to chip, or beat what they're going to. Actually, we couldn't use 2.5, so it had to be like a 5 or a dime. But then there's other ones that I know I'm not going to beat. Yeah. I'm not going to out board press Kenny Patterson.
Yeah, but those are the best days because that's when you have to master your shit talking because you can't beat them with the weight, so you start fucking with them that way.
And that's a different type of thing.
Yeah, well, and that was what it was. I'm like, I love the competitive aspect in the group and being a part of that and then talking shit with the boys just like I would be if we were drinking beers in my garage. Yeah. That stuff's awesome, but I'm like, I want to go and I want to beat a guy, but that's not why I'm doing it. Like if I would have went there and I had 785 would have gave me 2,700. I pulled 785 for fucking 6 reps. Mm-hmm. I'm like, if I would have hit that, I would have been way happier than an 1107 squat, which was a PR, a 810 bench, which was a PR, and then a total PR. And I hit a PR last meet, but it was like 5 pounds. So technically, I was stuck for 2 years. Mm-hmm. All of that, you think I'd be happy as pig and shit or something? Nope. I wanted the 2,700, and I think I would have got it if I would have had a better mindset with it. Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants to play that mental chess game, which is kind of still odd to me in powerlifting, the only way you're actually going to do that successfully is to destroy your own lifts. Yeah. Because you can say whatever you want to somebody, and maybe it has an impact, maybe it doesn't, but if you smoke your second attempt, that's all they need to see, especially if they're having a, fair day or not a good day. Yep. So it still comes back on what you do. That's it.
I had a perfect example of this that I already did and learned from in my career that I just somehow just didn't even reference. I was training under, have you ever heard of Art Little from Michigan? Mm-hmm. Powerlifting legend in Michigan. Mm-hmm. Awesome guy. He was the guy that got most of us started. And so he's like, hey man, you got a good deadlift. And that was by local standards. I was pulling 630 or something. Yeah. Not a big deal there, but just, I qualified for APF Nationals, and he's like, let's go do deadlift only. I'm like, okay. And then he's like, here's your guy. He knew the guy's name. I went on social media, and I'm watching this guy, and this guy's just ripping PRs. So then I start ramping my training up. I start maxing out too much and doing all this shit. I overtrained the fuck out of the meet, go in, bomb out on a deadlift only meet. It was the biggest asshole travesty. I was just so embarrassed, bro. I spent probably $2,500 in this round trip, just awful. And then I get home and I start looking, I'm like, I'm gonna go get him next year. And I'm looking and I realized that the dude was using the squared bumper plates that look like iron 45s. Yeah. So he wasn't even lifting the weight that I thought he was lifting, that made me overtrain myself and fuck my own deadlift. And that was I already had learned that lesson, but that's a sport, man. Mm-hmm. It's a fickle bitch, but man.
What did you do different coming into this meet? Because it's kind of a loaded question because strength doesn't linearly increase indefinitely. There's peaks and valleys and stuff like that. But if you said your total was kind of flat, you know, for a couple of years, but then this, forget the meat, you know, you smashed your hand, right? So and that's the competition part. Did you do anything different with your training leading into this one?
Well, this one was crazy. So all that being said, it was like a beautiful symphony of everything I learned to be able to even make it to the meet in terms of like how to auto-regulate, how to Band-Aid a lift if something's feeling off. Like I had no business. I got stapled to the floor with 405 like 2 weeks out. Like it was bad. But all of that happened, and I used everything that I accumulated as a coach and an athlete to make it through this thing. I was maybe like 8 or 10 weeks out, and I'm like, okay, I went too far on the other side of let's be cautious and optimal. I'm like, I have to stop being a bitch, and it's time to squat heavy weights. And what I figured out during this prep was that when I was doing heavy, like reverse band overloads, it was killing me. But if I kept it right in that zone of right around 1,000, I could handle those all day, multiple singles. So I'm like, fuck, I'm just going to do some reps. And then I looked online and people were starting to kind of do some reps at 1,000. And I'm like, I can do that. So let's try it. So I just would pick a bar and I'd work up and go suit bottoms and in briefs. And then I'd go, I'd hit a triple. In my head, I'm like, I don't give a fuck. It's going to be over 1,000. Whatever the jump is, I'll make the call when I get close. And then it ended up just always being like, all right, if I can add a plate and a quarter and then it's over 1,000, I don't care what's on there. We'll go. Started hitting triples. I ended up I just put myself in my old state, but I almost did it optimally, but I had to go back to that old state of like, you have to just fucking squat heavy. It wasn't like, this is the plan for max effort. We're going to peak like this. We're going to peak like this. I was running over 1,000-pound triples on my secondary day. And then I did one that Mike Skiba from Hellbent Barbell sent me. He kind of laid out how they do their Circumax. I'm like, that's cool. I wasn't anywhere near where they laid it out in his phase. I was like, you'd put band and chain on there. It's fucking horrible. Loaded that bitch up and just maxed it out. I just needed to max out heavy weights. I think I had optimal broed my way to not lifting heavy because I would work up and I'd be like, that's good enough today. And I did too much of that, like back down, leave one in the tank and not push a max weight. That was my first one. And then we had my baby girl, Abigail, was born September 18th. And holy shit, did I underestimate 2 kids versus 1 kid. I'm like, it was like a month in and I was just full zombie mode. Like people were like my kid's walking up with a bowl of cereal and I just got a coffee pot and I just pour it in there. I'm like, here you go. I don't even know what the fuck's going on. But my sleep was gone. So I used to sleep during the middle of the day in between my morning and evening, and that was just gone. So I looked at it and I'm like, okay, I was going to bed. I was going like 11 to 2:45 is when my alarm goes off. So I was like, all right, well, my whole training splits out the window. So I figured, I'm just going to accumulate 8 hours and then go train. So I ended up going. There'd be some weeks I'd get 2 sessions, some weeks 3. 1 or 2 weeks in there I got 4, like normal split, 2 uppers, 2 lowers. But I just had to use, and it was all based on auto regulation. Outside of that squat, it was good. And then my imbalances were eating me alive when I would pull sumo deadlifts. So I'm like, fuck it, that's out. And I'm just like, I just did a bunch of heavy reverse hypers, bunch of heavy lat work, and I did a bunch of GPP on my hamstrings. And I did like a hip thrust thing with I used the American cambered grip bar that you guys have. We filmed some good stuff with that. But we use that as a pivot point for your upper back, and we turn it into a hip thruster. Throw a band across your hip. I started hammering 4, 6, 8 sets of 20 on those every day just to get my glutes firing, and that worked wonders. My bench has always been the same. It was still one of those piss you off meets. I benched 900 2 weeks out, and then I barely moved my opener at 733, and then I was going to jump to 810 and then 900, and we ended up audibling. We went 770 attempt 2 and then 810. And another one that I told you last time, I learned how to use my lats on the platform. This one was I learned how to press in a straight line or straight-ish line in a shirt on the platform. So my second one, I settled that fucker, touched the highest point of my belly, and I just go whoop, locked it out, perfectly straight line. I'm like, it stopped at the top, and I'm like, am I all the way up? What the fuck's going on? And then we reacted. I looked. I was like, that felt like nothing. And then I went to 810, and because it depressed me higher into an arch, I did the same thing. smoked it. I'm like, that felt like nothing. What the fuck have I been doing? So I learned how to bench, but the grip wasn't there for a 900. I didn't even want to try. So we made a good attempt selection there. But also I talked with Tinajero. We made, you know, I had 3 or 4 contingency plans based on every scenario. But yeah, the squat was huge. And then like regulating away from the deadlift. I did a bunch of conventionals. I was doing I load up like 2 or 3 blues on a belt squat, and I was just doing like hip extensions, like hinges, like 20s, 30s. Sometimes I do a 1 minute AMRAP. Like I figured I'm like, I just got to prime my patterns and then allow myself to just do what I can do as healthy as I can be on the platform. And then I'm going to use my gear and dial up my tightness and straps. And that was a huge one that I did. And so when I was doing my 1,000-pound reps, I was like, what's the most disgusting shit I can do with a pair of straps on? I'm like Mars bar, spider bar. Don't ever fucking do that. I did spider bar. So I did 1,005 against doubled mini bands, full kit, cranked the straps 10 out of 10. I did a triple and I about fucking died. It was horrible. And I hit the hole on rep 2, or sorry, the 3rd rep, hit the hole on rep 3, came up and I had my suit loaded and I just hit the switch too hard and the thing shook. Can't tell in the video, but I go round my back over because you can't really do anything in a suit. And then I just RP 75 this thing to the top, and then I racked it. I'm like, okay, that's my squat's peak now. That's enough overload for 30 years. But yeah, it was. I was happy with it just in terms of like how I could navigate and actually make it to that meet. But then I also realized like, hey man, you're about to be 40 soon. Next 3 years here, we can't do these meets. We have to be healthy going into the meets. I would have, looking back at it, if I could have changed it, I would have just laid off and went in healthy and relied on my skill that I've learned over the years. And I think I would have did a little bit better across the board.
Because you have this, I don't want to say recovery, but you have this, instead of like a peaking phase, it's more or less, well, lack of a better word, like a recovery phase. But then whatever you were doing before that kind of beat you to shit, right? Then if we go back to whatever the phase was before that, it was too conservative, I suppose.
That was what it felt like, yep.
Whereas for the next meet, would you, instead of that too conservative phase, put in like a transition phase? That
was where I feel like I messed up. That transformation phase is where I messed up. And it was just, in general, I wasn't... why I started squatting heavy is I sat there and I'm like, I'm not going to pull out of this meet and I'm not going to be a little bitch. Like, this kid is a young, really nice kid, Matt Brooks, and I told him I was going to be there, and he was advertising that these big name lifters are going to be there. I'm not going to let some fucking kid down. My wife already took it off of work. I flew in Tinajero and his girl, and then we had the whole crew going down. All the boys were in one spot. I wasn't about to come sit in this fucking chair without a 1,100 pound squat. That was what I told myself. And it was time. And I also was thinking in my head, and I'm like, you can't be considered one of the best squatters out of the whole mix of everything without being north of 11 somewhere, especially in this day and age when everybody in their grandma's squatting 11. So I was just, I put the old pressure that I used to put, instead of like taking it off and being like, you're nice and prepared, everything's good, you should execute. It was like, no, you're going and you're going to fucking execute. My opener felt like dog shit. It moved fine. It felt like shit. I was like, what's the jump in my head optimally? Oh, probably under a PR, probably what are the 1050. I was like, no, we came to squat 1107. That goes on the bar. And then I looked at my guys. One of my guys is a good high-level strongman. And these motherfuckers can crank the hell out of some straps when they do their deadlift. And I had my one guy that was wrapping my knees. He usually sets my straps. And I go, I'm like, I tell his name's Nate. I'm like, Nate, do my straps. And he cranked this fucker. I couldn't even breathe. And we got under it. And that's the hardest part about squatting these really heavy weights. When I say really heavy, it's relative, like over like 1,000, like 25. It feels like the challenge is not the weight anymore. It's controlling the bar. It whips no matter how good of a bar you have. So I had it at normal rack height, not thinking that I probably should have lowered it. But I unracked this fucker and it felt like I had a Yukon bar in my back. I'm like, what the hell's going on? It was just shaking all over. And then I hit it, and then I walked off. And I looked at the other guy that was taking it after me. And I was like, I got a tip for you, man. That's fucking heavy. And I just walked back into the warm-up room. But it was just, it was a good kind of all around 360 meet. Good learning. I had awesome fun, and it was like that boost in the right direction that got me back to like, because when I get burnt out, man, there's nowhere to go because I'm there every day and I'm a coach. And then you have to be up for your athletes, and then I have to program still, so there's no way to get around it. And that's my whole life now. So it's not like I could pull like what Hoff was saying they do, like get out, go to another commercial gym. Like I can't do that. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't have the time in my schedule. I'm not going to go pay a membership. We have everything I need there. And then, but it was one of those ones, like I was already looking forward to the offseason. I'm like, oh, I get to not put 1,000 pounds on my back. What am I going to do? You know, that week after the meet, I get to do this. I get to bodybuild. I get to do whatever, you know. So it was just not in the good mindset. But then luckily I had that good interaction with those guys on the platform, and that little shit that they would never even know affected anybody. That was what got me through the meet. So it was cool.
With how did you approach that off season then? Because my assumption based upon what you're saying is you change things throughout the off season to be more optimal.
That was I kept going with optimal, and I just overdid it. It was like, oh, I need to do some balance work here instead of like something hurts or I'm shifting or I'm doing an assessment and some, you know, something doesn't check out. All right, well, let's take it easy today and mess with this. There's that fine line that we have to walk. We're walking between like you got to be lifting heavy shit to get strong, and that's just what you have to do sometimes. And then you also have to be optimal and train smart sometimes. And I went too optimal and didn't start banging heavy weights. Mm-hmm. And that was the best thing. So I was sitting there with one of my partners, and one of my gym partners, and we're just talking about, I'm like, dude, I haven't taken anything. It's what happened was like 2 or 3 times where I would go up like into the mid 8s, and then I would just jump to the whatever 1,000 something, and then I missed it. And I'm like, well, it's a misgroove. And then I'm like, I'm not going to take it again. But I just didn't accumulate anything between that like 860 and 1050 range. Yeah. And so when I started back at it, I was like, okay, well, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go like 875. And then I just did some singles. And then I was like, all right. And then within like 2 weeks, everything came right back. And then I was like, all right, we're putting $1,000 on, let's strap up. And then some of it too was like, I was trying to like layer some gear, like, oh, we'll go briefs here and then add a wrap. And then I was like, fuck that. We're going full kit. Like I'm going to get used to, I already knew I was going to need full strap and all the equipment to get me the squat PR because I knew my legs weren't strong enough. So it was great in that regard because it forced me to rely on the gear, which I never had to do very much. Like when my legs were the strongest they've ever been, I did a prep where I was launching raw squats. I hit, it was a 785 or 800 sleeve squat. I hit 880 in wraps on a Yukon bar. And then I did 835 on a Mars bar for a set of 5 in knee reps, leading into my 1070 squat. And I used the equipment like shit, but my legs were strong enough to get me that squat. This one was the 100% opposite, which was a good learning curve for me because I started, well, thank you, by the way. The last one gave me a nice boost in business online, but I got a bunch of these multiply guys, and what is amazing is how much they get out of the gear that I just don't get, and I don't know how to get yet. But that told me, like, I have one guy that was struggling to rack pull 405. This fucker puts a suit on, goes sumo, 750 deadlift. I'm like, what kind of fucking black magic is this? What are we doing here? Just completely insane. So, and then same thing for the shirt. Like when I was healthy and I was pumping my raw benches out, I would be destroying some of these guys looking at their videos versus mine, and they go to the meet and outbench me by 150 pounds. So I already knew like I needed more of that. And then this kind of almost forced me into a corner to have to use it because I hated, I would just kind of lay the strap over on all my attempts. And then this one was like, all right, we're cranking it. And I'm like, I used to be like, oh, it's going to pull me forward and I can't breathe. And then I was like, this is multiply. It's going to fucking suck. So we're going to strap it up and then you're just going to hold on for dear life and squat it. And or you're not.
No, but it's easy to get caught up in that. There's you can have, full kit on and everything tight. And then, as we would all try to do, you're just going to try to squat down body weight squat, right?
Yeah.
And you go like 3 inches and you're like, there's no way, any weight's going to get me down there.
Yep.
Right. But you got to trust that it will and that you need enough weight, and maybe sometimes it doesn't, but it sounds like from what you're saying is if you make those big jumps like that, I think a lot of people will do this. They make those big jumps. So essentially you're kind of going from like a high 70%ish, maybe 80%ish to, well, if you miss it, you know, over 100%.
Yeah.
But you're not acquiring that skill of that 90%, which is going to be a grind and something you have to think your way through, which even when you're super conservative with the training, which there are times you have to do that. You have to. But if that's all you ever do, then you're never in that slow grind and you kind of lose a little bit of that skill.
That was what it felt like. It felt like I didn't have the skill, and it just zapped my strength endurance because I wasn't taking multiple like me in a full kit at 865 is not even like that. That doesn't feel like it's like an RP, like a 7.5. Because if I just hit the groove right, I might lock it up an inch high, but I just blast it. It's just on the equipment, and then you go. You know how that is. And so it's like I don't have those. Like I need to have a 950 in there to grease the groove correctly. I can take that to depth, full depth, but I can feel the pressure. I can feel the bar bending a little bit. I feel that compression. I feel the exponentially better brace or heavier brace that you get with the heavy weights. And I had none of that going on in my training, and I was just like. Just kind of like, oh, you idiot. So,
well, the lighter weights they're also going to move faster. So your brain doesn't slow down. Yeah. Like with a really heavy grind, it may only take, you know, if we're timing it 3-4 seconds, maybe, but in your brain, it seems like it was a half an hour.
Oh, that my 1107 was build, pick in my head. I talked to myself through the entire lift.
Yeah.
I rolled in, I'm build. What the fuck? Why is this not breaking off the rack? All right, we're going to try to shrug. I didn't shrug it, but I'm shrugging it. And then I'm like, oh, it's off. We're floating. And then all of a sudden it was, oh, that just compressed my spine 4 inches. All right, arch, sit back, open. Oh my God, this thing is shaking. What the fuck are we doing? Is this a bamboo bar? And then they're like up. And then I came up and it stalled. And then it was, all right, I was shifting to my left. Sorry, I shifted to my left. I'm like, oh, my back popped a little bit. And I'm like, shift back right. All right, we're stuck. Keep moving a little bit.
Yeah.
Put it in the rack. That all went through my head. It was literally like a 3-minute combo and then, you know, the 4-second video.
Yeah, so, you know, that doesn't happen with those other weights.
No, I had no practice, you know.
And it's, once you learn that skill, it's like riding a bike. It will come back.
Yep.
But you have to do it. And the trick as a coach is now we have to teach the younger lifters how to do that. Because when we're younger and lifting those heavy weights, all that's going through our mind is, just whatever, rage, you know, whatever it is. But as the weights get heavier and you have to become a little more deliberate about the whole thing, you have to process it in real time, but it has to be automatic. Because if you try to consciously do it, you're going to fuck the lift up.
Exactly.
Right? So it's an acquired skill, which is kind of a benefit of max effort work, which leans into my bias a little bit because you learn how to do that with multiple bars and different, you know.
Well, this was like subconscious because as soon as it hit, I came out like off of like the ass of the suit, and then I felt like I was buried into my heels in a good way, not like too much on the heels, but I was in such a good stack that I could like spread the floor in my head. I was just infinitely spreading the floor, which was a cue that I learned years ago, learning how to get off a box. So it just reverted to like a primal pattern that's in my head now. And I would just spread the bar and reach with your head spread. And it was advancing so slow. And then I just got it. And I was like, okay. And then I got done and I went and kind of sat down for a minute and I was like, it was great because it allows you to reflect when you need to. Like in that headspace, I needed to reflect. I was like, I 10 out of 10 grinded a 410 squat my first meet in knee wraps at 220 while I was on TRT. I was that weak. And I was like, how the fuck am I ever going to be one of these guys? Like it was so far away. And then, you know, I did a weight cut because again, I was in that mindset where I was like, I have to win at all costs. I do very well at cutting weight. I've been cutting weight for a long time. Going back to the fight days, I used to cut huge amounts of weight in strongman. It was a very good tool for me. I'm like, you know what? Let's just try it out. So I ended up cutting from 275, 253 scale weight, refed right back up. So I was like, all right, because I'm thinking, I'm like, all right, let's give these motherfuckers a taste of this. Let's see who can come down to the body weight and see what goes on there. So I was like, I was just kind of just in my head, just, you know, talking to these guys, and they're never going to hear me. But yeah, so I did that. And so it was a pretty good squat for that body weight. I mean, it was an overall PR, but I mean, if we take into account the weight cut, which I don't give a shit about the coefficient, you know, there's no weight classes in the jungle.
Yeah.
But, you know,
then again, you're not going to survive very well being 310 pounds.
Well, yeah, there's not a lot of 310 fat powerlifters in the jungle either.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of Navy SEALs are.
Like, I didn't have my CPAP last night. Can you give me a minute before I start running? But no, so it was just, you know, it was like, all right, well, that was a pretty good squat in general. And, you know, like, it was I got stuck on the shitter with the nerves. It was lumbar nerves 3 and 4 pushed out into everything that innervated that side, and it caused my QL to lock up. So we had to go QL origin, insertion, and paraspinals. We did 3, and I was like, all right, well, you know, I haven't had some cortisone shots in a few years, and we're not going inside of a joint. So I was like, whatever, that's fine. And I just, at that point, I was like, I don't give a fuck. I'll go there with one fucking leg, but I'm gonna go take my loss like a man, is what I had in my head. And the only thing I was like, oh, I'll just come out with a bench PR. That was what it felt like. I was going to have a monster bench day.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and click here, 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 or here for more videos.